I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land we are recording on, the Camaragal and the Guringai peoples, to their elders past, present and emerging, and we celebrate the ongoing connections to land and water. Why is it that so many men feel the need to bottle up their emotions, to carry their burdens in silence? In a world where vulnerability is often seen as a weakness, countless men are pushing down their feelings and leading lives of quiet desperation. We hear from Tim Hewson, the visionary behind Mongrels Men, an organisation dedicated to shattering the silence and building a brotherhood of support and understanding.
Welcome to Sharing Stories, Changing Lives. The host, Karen Sander, has the privilege of interviewing individuals from all walks of life, each with their own powerful and inspiring stories. The guests share their life experiences, and in doing so, they celebrate the transformative magic of storytelling. To learn more, visit www.thestoryroom.au and explore the private membership area, the Backstage Pass.
Welcome, Tim Hewson.
Okay.
Can you tell us a little bit about you?
I am the father of 3 spirited teenagers. I'd probably describe myself as a passionate mental health advocate, a semi-proficient middle-aged community footballer, the founder of Mongrels Men, Health and Wellbeing. I'm at the halfway point in my life and I've really only just figured out what it is that I want to do for a job.
How did you figure out the halfway point?
I figured 50 is a good halfway point. Whether it's ambitious or not, time will tell.
You've reached the half century, is it, in cricket?
Yeah, I turned 50 in November last year. Came at a very good time for me because it allowed me to kind of reassess where my life has been, where I want to spend my energy, attention and focus, what makes me happy, gets me out of bed in the mornings, and what I want to do.
What inspired you to start Mongrels Men, and what are the core beliefs that drive the organisation?
I'm going to start with the first part of your 2-part question first. And
I love 2-part questions.
as long as I can give 2-part answers. There was a number of things that kind of coincided for me. I think the catalyst was probably my divorce. So this is going back about 8 or so years ago, but the history of Mongrels Men originally started back in about kind of 2008. But I really only started to focus on identifying, I think, the key challenges I had in my life. I spent 20 years with my head buried in the sand, struggling with, anxiety, depression, having panic attacks. I'd been sucking it up, burying it deep, so I didn't have to deal with it, soldiering on. And I had started to unconsciously reach out. And I did that in the form of a middle-aged football that I made reference to before, and set up a middle-aged blokes soccer team. And it wasn't long after that I was going through on the fast track to divorce. I was separated on the fast track to divorce. A mate reached out to me, knowing that I was having some challenges in coping with my new situation, and got me running up and down DY Beach. And the more we ran, the more we talked, the more we shared, the more we dug into the challenges that we were facing, the more each of us opened up, and it became a bit of a brave space. So I had this team in the background. I had this experience with Trent running up and down DY Beach. I had 2 guys come to me as the manager of the middle-aged blokes soccer team and say 2 things, which I think changed the course of my life forever. And the first one was, thanks for organising training, thanks for organising the games. I've now got 90 minutes to myself. It's not something that I have, that I've ever had. I'm not a father, I'm not a brother, I'm not a boss. I don't have to worry about managing a business. It's just my 90 minutes. And I thought that was quite powerful, but certainly not as powerful as the next comment that was made to me the following year, when a guy came up to me at our end of year celebration and said, thanks for organising. Thanks for making sure I turned up every Wednesday to training. I turned up to the games. Thanks for organising me to be there. Because if you didn't, I just wouldn't be here. And I said, what are you
Wow.
talking about? And he said, well, I've been considering taking my own life for the past 9 months, and having the support of the team, having something to look forward to every week, literally saved my life. And so that kind of hit me like a sledgehammer. There was something quite powerful about having created a community of men that ideally got together to play football, but it was obviously so much more than that. So I started to kind of dig into that, looked at the mental health statistics. I was increasingly realizing I was surrounded by family and friends. I had buried myself in my own ignorance for 20 years, not dealing with my own mental health challenges. And so it became quite clear to me that I needed to do something about it. And so that's kind of initially where we started. It was a combination of soccer teams and runs and things that people had said to me, and then realizing that there was a huge challenge out there for men and their mental health, and that simple things like movement and connection and the development of community had actually had an impact, and in fact had, in this case, saved this guy's life.
Was it a moment of realization that you just went, oh my God, this is bigger than me?
We were out celebrating another successful end of year season, so I kind of shrugged it off with a bit of a, mate, that's the only way I can secure my spot in the team is to manage you blokes. And I kind of made a joke of it, and he found it funny. But as the night progressed, it started to kind of circle in the back of my mind. And it wasn't until I woke up the next day. I then approached the captain of the team and I said, listen, this has just been made known to me. This is the challenge that this guy was facing. And so we made a very conscious decision from that point on. We were very good at being there for one another. Once we crossed that white line and we were on the field, we behaved like a team. But as soon as we stepped off the field, we weren't. And so we realised that we could do a much better job of looking out and checking in and then supporting one another. So that's exactly what we did. And it took time and it took practice. But I don't know any other male community like my football team. And the guys that come in and out of our team and have over the last decade or so have said that they've never experienced anything like it. It had a huge impact. It changed the way I thought about my relationship with men, and it changed my capacity to open up, to feel supported, to feel heard, that I had a tribe or a pack that I could rely upon. And, that in culmination with the local community initiatives that I started running around DY were the signs that I needed to say, there's something in this and you're getting a benefit out of it and you're helping others.
On the journey that you've been on establishing Mongrels Men, and I presume Mongrels Men came quite a bit after the football team, what challenges have you faced?
I think I grew up always as a bit of an anxious or nervous kid. I was paranoid about everything. I grew up and my masculine role model, my immediate masculine role model was my father. So I'd watch him put a tailored suit, a freshly pressed shirt, shave, comb his hair, get ready for work. By the time he was just about to walk out the door, he'd put me on the stool next to him and I'd be in the mirror and he'd show me how to tie the perfect Windsor knot. That kind of need for, I'm going to say perfection, and I didn't really think about it at the time. I was just a kid. Transitioned into my teenage years where I worried about absolutely everything. And I mean everything, from not having enough hair where I should as a teenage boy who went to gym class a couple of days a week, to having too much hair on my knees. And I was lucky enough to adopt a few unfortunate nicknames at school as a result of both of those things. And I think I carried that into my early 20s where I started to have panic attacks. And the panic attacks I experienced became part of my everyday routine. I used to work in banking and finance, and I'd get in nice and early. I'd prep myself, make sure I was ready to go. But by 9:30, after my sales meetings and after the economic updates, I would literally walk into the bathroom as quickly and as calmly as I could to put my hands against the cubicle walls and strap myself in to write out what was always, like clockwork, 9:30, my first panic attack for the day. I had no idea what was happening. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know whether I was going to spend the rest of my life like that. I was kind of buried in ignorance and confusion, but I did what I was taught to do, which is just pick up, soldier on, and not burden anybody with it, and just deal with it, kind of suck it up. And so I spent about 20 years dealing with that on and off. And of course, the anxiety and panic attacks turned into later depression. And if you were to ask my kids and even my ex-wife what I was like, I'd be described as a workaholic. I'd be tired, grumpy, irritable, and angry. And that's the way it was exhibited for me. But thinking back to when I was that kid standing on the stool next to my father, who got ready and taught me how to tie the perfect women's knot, I looked in the mirror and I saw everything that I thought I was meant to be. I was a hardworking father providing for his family. I wore a suit to work. I had a good job. And none of it made any sense to me. Roll the clock forward a couple of years and I'm going through divorce. And of course, that's when I start to look at who I am, how I've behaved, what I need to do, how I need to change. There was a fear of it possibly being too late. I'm in my 40s. Is it too late to change? Is it too late to break those habits? Is it too late to kind of turn the clock back on some of the things that I've been experiencing for such a long period of my life? I still am challenged by panic attacks and anxiety, but I also know how now to manage those. I reached out and I got some help and support, and I still use that when I need to from time to time. Yeah, it's fair to say I learned a lot during that period of my life about myself. I see a lot of those behaviours in the work that I do with men more broadly through the charity and the business.
Looking at the men that you're supporting, this must be making a huge difference to them to know that you've actually been there. And at times you're probably still there.
Look, I continue to share my story with the men in our broader community because I think it's an important part of explaining where Mongrels Men came from, why it's a charity, why its purpose is to change the lives of men and improve the mental health and well-being of men, and the pillars that we use. When I talk about pillars, I'm referring to conversation, connection, community, movement, and the fifth one is education. And that's from experience. I quite often asked where and why Mongrels started, and I tell them that it kind of started with me, even if I didn't know that that's what was going to happen. I kind of felt like I had to experience all of that to really appreciate the impact of how sometimes those simple things can help, but also more importantly, as I was increasingly surrounded by friends, family, and colleagues that were being impacted, that there was an opportunity to help others.
Can you explain those pillars?
If I start with movement, there's an obvious connection between movement or physical exercise and mental health. Research suggests that exercise 3 to 4 times per week can actually improve mental health by up to 40%. So we use movement as one of our core pillars, not just because of the mental health benefits, but also because it gets blokes together. It gives them a reason. It provides some distraction. And if I think back to my experience with Trent when I started running up and down the beach, we were side by side. We weren't eyeballing one another. It was less confrontational. We had something to keep us busy. But at the same time, we were generating feel-good chemicals as a result of exercise, like endorphins, and that helps you open up a little bit. I know that if I want to have a conversation with my teenage son, the best time is to pick him up after a sporting match or after training, when endorphins are pumping through his system and he feels good, and he's generally the one that starts the conversation. Community and connection. Let me tackle connection next, because we are human beings and we need connection with others to survive. The World Health Organization has recently indicated that isolation and loneliness are the next major public health issues, that 1 in 3 of us, even though we live with people and are surrounded by people, are lonely. We know that 1 in 3 men have no social connections of their own. These are big and broad challenges. So we want to make everything local and community focused. And the idea of bringing blokes together and giving them something to do allows them to then connect. And the connection part is important because that builds rapport and it builds trust. And once you have those things, you've got a safety net to be able to have a conversation, which is another one of the pillars. We want blokes to feel comfortable, to be able to talk to one another, to be able to check in, to ask questions, and then provide support. And then we stack education on top of that. We've got 3 core programs. The first one's our community meetups. That's getting guys off the couch, outdoors, into fresh air, moving, developing new social and support networks in their local community with other men. And then we stack education on top of that. So our second program is what we call Doghouse, and that's what we call or refer to as a brave space, where it's information and education focused. So it could be anything from gut health to the importance of sleep, to how to manage stress and avoid burnout, meditation, breath work. We have psychologists come in and talk. But the idea is we're helping guys build tools of resilience so that they can access that toolkit when they need them. And the education part then continues into our third program, which is our mental health response. So if you think about a rising tide lifting all boats, we want to lift the comfort levels and capacity, awareness and knowledge of all men in the community to be able to identify signs and symptoms of mental health conditions, to be able to tackle conversations around mental health, know what to do when somebody needs support, and of course, have a conversation about suicide and be comfortable asking those questions, knowing what to do. They're kind of the 5 pillars. I think I've covered them all, the 3 programs and how we thread them and interconnect them together.
It's an amazing foundation, but why Mongrels Men?
I kind of flagged that Mongrels Men started a lot earlier than us becoming a charity 3 years ago. And in 2008, myself and a friend, James, he's now our community champion in Burleigh Heads, tried to organise a game of golf. We had busy lives with kids and family and work responsibilities, so we had to book it 3 months in advance. And while we were waiting for the first month to tick over, we thought, well, let's just invite a couple of other blokes along. So my brother, and he brought his mates. My sister invited a boyfriend. He brought some mates. We had a really broad range of socioeconomic backgrounds and cultures and age groups. And of course, as soon as you organise for a couple of blokes to go away for a weekend, it becomes a competition. A competition needs a trophy. The trophy needs a name. And we looked at it ourselves and went, well, we're just a pack of motley mongrels. We're all kind of, shapes and sizes and backgrounds. So it became the Mongrel Masters, and it started with a golf event that was 8 blokes. The next year became 20, and then 30, 40, and now between 80 to 100 men turn up every year to this golf day, which is now a charity fundraiser for us. I want to make a couple of points about the name because it's meant to also represent strength and resilience and the underdog, or the fight in the underdog, that kind of never give up attitude. And you hear it on our soccer field all the time. You've got to find your mongrel. You've got to find your fight. And given that we're a charity focused on men's mental health, it's all about finding your pack to support you, but also finding your inner strengths.
If you're interested in getting more involved in our community, connecting with people who share your interests, you can do this by visiting our website at www.thestoryroom.au.
What specific impact has Mongrels Men had on its members and the broader community, especially fostering communication?
We don't force conversations, and I think this is really important, but we do know that out of the activities and the programs, conversation and connection are two of the most critical. I mean, I know that we've had great impacts on the men in our local communities. I know that we've got them out the couch and outdoors. They feel better physically. They feel better mentally and emotionally. We've seen their habits and behaviours transform. We know we've saved lives. But when it comes to the impact that we've had, we know that of the two. So we did an annual survey last year, and some of the feedback that came back was the largest benefits for men, apart from mental health, and 42% of them said that mental health was the largest benefit. 39% said that connections were a very close number two, and that capacity for them to be able to form and share and talk and connect and communicate is critically important, because 35% of them then said it's about being able to talk. And if we look at the numbers and say, all right, well, what's the improvement in terms of the way they feel more confident and comfortable to be able to have a conversation afterwards compared to before? There's a 35% increase in their level of confidence around being able to connect and communicate with other men. And I think that's a kind of powerful number when looking at blokes, because we can sometimes find it a little challenging
Yes.
to open up.
Why do you believe men need a dedicated support group like Mongrels Men to help them move away from suppression of their emotions?
There's a couple of things at play here. So the one is, why something specifically for men? And I'll rattle off a couple of stats around men and mental health that might give you a bit of an indication as to why we focus on men. We know that 50% of them will experience a mental health challenge at some point in their lifetime, that at least a quarter of them will experience a diagnosed mental health disorder. So I think anxiety, depression. We know that 7 of the 9 suicides that occur on average every day in Australia are men, that suicide is the leading cause of death for men under age 45. But we also know that 75% of blokes don't reach out and get help when they need it. I talked before about 1 in 3 men not having social connections. And I think this is where we then get to the crux of your question. 1 in 3 men feel the pressure to be masculine, and think about masculinity as being manning up, soldiering on, cracking up, being told to drink a glass of cement. And that's even worse for younger age groups, where 50% of young men aged between 18 to 34 feel that pressure. If you think about the challenge of being masculine versus the need of the feeling of need and feeling of vulnerability to be able to open up and have a conversation, they're very much at odds with one another. And some of this is about masculine norms. Some of this is about this concept of us men not being able to see or be what we can't see. Who would you nominate as male role models for modern men? And I think there's not many teenage boys that have posters of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson or Arnold Schwarzenegger up on their walls, because they're having deep and meaningful conversations with their mates about mental health. We haven't been taught. I don't think we've been able to have, or men feel as though they've had the permission. And certainly in my case, I was always told to harden up and crack on. So I just buried everything down as deep as I could. And that meant not surfacing emotions and not talking about stuff which meant I never really dealt with it. And of course, for me, that was anger and irritability and digging myself into work. And so you just ignore it.
What feedback have you received from the community about it, and the participants about the role in promoting emotional openness?
I think we've been really lucky. We've received great community support and feedback. And that's everything from winning awards for the work that we do in the local community, through to our local MP making recognition statements to New South Wales State Parliament, recognising the work that we do. Those things are showing that we're having an impact beyond the men. The families of the men tell us that we're making an impact. We have a bunch of volunteers that put themselves forward to help and support us, and they could be presenting at Doghouse or helping us run events and activities. We have local business partners that want to help us, whether it's someone like amazing merch that help us with our merchandise, or the local cafe down in DY, Bambolina, that says, you know what, we'll give you a discount on your coffees because you're here 3 days a week, and it's an important part of getting guys to connect. We are lucky because as an all volunteer charity, we've got a bunch of volunteers which help and support us. We were recently fortunate enough to win the Westfield Local Hero Award, and out of that came a range of campaigns and opportunities for us to get in front of other people and have conversations and talk about who we are and what we want to do. Local media has been great for us as well. I think I say we're lucky. There's a lot of hard work that sits in behind that from all of the volunteers. But I think we're lucky that the challenges faced by men have been identified. The men's mental health challenges has been put up onto a platform that gives us the capacity to be able to have a conversation with people. Probably the greatest sense of how community works is 60% of the blokes that come to us because of a dominant woman in their life suggesting that they need to come and have a chat to us. They've seen our banner, they've seen us on Facebook, they've seen us on social media, and 60% of the blokes come to us because a wife or a partner or a mother or an auntie or a female colleague have said, you need to go and chat, you need some new social connections, and you need to get moving.
By joining Mongrels actually has a flow-on effect back into their family lives. And I think you mentioned that earlier.
I've asked a number of women why they would like to get involved and support us, just as a matter of interest. I ask the same question of men, of course, but women always say, I want a happy home life, or I want or need him to change, or I want to have a better male role model for my kids. And so that for me says that there is obviously more at play than just the individual. For me, I think there's a couple of things, and can I read something out? So as a result of our survey, one of the guys, there was 200 responses that came back and 200 quotes, but there was one that kind of stuck out to me because it summarizes what you were saying. And it's, the supportive community, free of judgment, became my safe space. Talking openly allowed me to chip away at my walls and boost my confidence. I started reaching out, offering the same support that I received, creating a ripple effect of hope. Mongrels Men didn't just improve my mental health, it empowered me. It's more than a charity, it's a reminder that vulnerability is not a weakness, but strength in disguise. And so everything that we've kind of talked about the support, the role of community, about getting guys to open up and creating a brave space is kind of captured for me in that one quote or that one comment, which talks very much about vulnerability and empowerment.
What's your ultimate goal for Mongrels Men? Where would you like it to go in the next few years?
There are about 13 million men in the country. I'd love to put as big a dent in the mental health and wellbeing of that Australian population of men as possible. The goal for the charity in the next 5 years is to impact 1 million men, and that means having 800 locations across the country. But our aspirations longer term are actually much bigger than that. We would love to have a community champion running events and activities for men in nearly every postcode across Australia. That means we have 2,000 community champions all running events and activities for men so they have somewhere to go, something to do, someone to talk to, and the support they need. And if we get there, we can impact 1 million men a year. But they're just numbers. So what do we want to do with that? I think probably 3 things. The first is we want to normalise conversations about mental health. So, make it part of an everyday conversation. Make mental health conversations the same sort of conversations that we have around things like physical health, and shift the narrative from manning up and drinking glasses of cement and soldiering on and sucking it up and just cracking on to speaking up. The second is I think we would love to make mental health more visible. And I don't mean just showcase mental health and how to improve, but as a community get better at spotting the signs and symptoms. Because once you do that, if you are taught and educated on what to do, then you can then provide the support that's needed. And that support is probably the third. If we can empower men to find their pack, build those social connections, have more meaningful conversations, get their bodies moving, ultimately having more and generating more mental health champions across the country. I think that's where we want to go.
If you could fast track the growth of Mongrels Men and its mission to break the silence around men's mental health emotions, what would be the one thing you would fast track?
It's actually really hard to pick just one thing, and that's because there's so many great opportunities and so many things to do and so many options and areas to have an impact in. But I think if I was to fast track one thing, it would be to build a national network or community of volunteers that could run our events and our programs across the country. And that would eventuate in us then having the capacity to deliver those programs, our programs, to as many people, men, as possible and have the greatest impact on the greatest number of men.
How do people find out about Mongrels Men?
You can jump online, go to the website, www.mongrelsmen.com. We're on Facebook and Instagram, LinkedIn. Most people find out about us through, Facebook events and either word of mouth, or they would see our banner planted in the ground or in the grass or in the beach somewhere, and they walk past it about 5 or 6 times, and then they check us out online, and then they come along. But I'd go to social media. That's where all of our events and our activities and information is.
And for those of you who are listening, you may not realise that the person you're sharing this podcast with, discussions about men's mental health, is one that may just save a life.
Thank you to you, Karen, for having me on, the opportunity to be able to not only tell my story, but talk a little bit about what we do at Mongrels Men. So thank you to you and to those that are listening.
Thank you for tuning in to Sharing Stories, Changing Lives. We'd like to invite you to support us by purchasing a Backstage Pass, costing about the same as 2 cups of coffee each month. With the Backstage Pass, you'll gain access to workshops and exclusive content, including videos from our live events. You can do this by visiting our website at www.thestoryroom.au. We can continue to show that sharing stories changes lives.